You made me the enemy. Now we play by my rules.
The phone screaming at 3 in the morning is never good news. I'd learned that lesson the hard way over 38 years of living, but apparently I was a slow learner because I still answered it. Mr. Weller, this is Mercy General Hospital. We need you to come in and sign discharge papers for your wife. I sat up in bed, rubbing my eyes. The digital clock glowed an angry red in the darkness of my cluttered bedroom. Empty beer bottles lined the nightstand like soldiers, and yesterday's work clothes lay crumpled on the floor where I'd dropped them after another 12-hour shift at Brennan Construction. I'm not married, I said, my voice thick with sleep and confusion. Sir, we have Lisa Weller listed as your emergency contact, and Lisa? The name hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. Lady, I haven't seen Lisa in 7 years. She cleaned out our joint account and disappeared with some hotshot she met at her marketing firm. So, unless she's calling from the grave, you've got the wrong number. Mr. Weller, please. She's been in an accident, and she specifically asked for you. She says she needs your help. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. She needs my help? That's rich. Tell Lisa that Gary Weller died the day she walked out with my life savings. Tell her to call her boyfriend, but even as I said it, curiosity was eating at me like acid. What kind of accident? Why was she back in town? And why the heck was she using my name as her emergency contact after all these years? Sir, if you could just... Fine, I'll be there in 20 minutes. But I'm not signing anything and I'm not paying for anything. Got it? The drive to Mercy General took me through the heart of our dying industrial city. Streetlights flickered over empty lots where factories used to stand. The kind of place where people like me worked construction jobs and drank at dive bars and pretended we weren't slowly drowning in mediocrity. Lisa had always hated this place, said it was beneath her ambitions. The hospital lobby smelled like disinfectant and broken dreams. A tired-looking nurse with kind eyes led me to the discharge desk where I got my first look at Lisa in 7 years. She was different. Her hair was shorter, darker, and something about her face looked altered. Plastic surgery, maybe. Her clothes were expensive, but wrinkled, and there was a bandage on her forehead. She looked up when she heard my footsteps, and for a moment, I saw something I'd never seen in Lisa's eyes before. Genuine fear. Gary, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank God you came. Don't. I held up my hand. Just don't. What kind of accident? Car accident. I was driving back from Cleveland, and I hit some ice on Route 9. The car flipped twice. She touched the bandage gingerly. I'm lucky to be alive. Cleveland? What were you doing in Cleveland? She looked away. Business. Right, business. I turned to the nurse. What exactly do you need me to sign? Just the discharge papers, sir. Someone needs to take responsibility for her release. And she doesn't have insurance that covers that. Nope. I backed away from the desk. Not my problem. Lisa made her choice 7 years ago when she stole $43,000 from our joint account and ran off with Derek Hunt. Remember Derek, Lisa? The entrepreneur with the fancy car and the big promises? Lisa's face went white. Gary, please. I can explain everything, but not here, not like this. Explain? You want to explain? I felt the old anger rising in my chest like bile. Explain how you forged my signature on that loan application? Explain how you maxed out our credit cards buying gifts for your boyfriend? Or maybe you want to explain how I found out about your affair from your best friend Adriana, who felt so sorry for me that she showed me the pictures from Derek's Instagram? The nurse was looking uncomfortable, glancing between us like she was watching a tennis match. Other people in the lobby were starting to stare. Lisa stood up shakily. I made mistakes, Gary, but I'm in trouble now. Real trouble. And you need what? Money, a place to stay, someone to clean up your mess again? I shook my head. I learned a long time ago that people don't change, Lisa. They just get better at hiding who they really are. She grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. Her grip was desperate, her fingers digging into my jacket. Please, just listen to me for 5 minutes. Then if you want to walk away, I'll understand. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. The fear in her eyes was real, but so was the manipulation. Lisa had always been good at playing the victim when it suited her purposes. 5 minutes, I said, but not here. We walked outside into the cold November night. The parking lot was nearly empty except for a few cars belonging to the night shift workers. Lisa pulled her thin jacket tighter around herself and shivered. Derek's dead, she said without preamble. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What? He died 3 months ago. Heart attack. He was only 36, Gary. One day he was fine, the next day he was gone. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. And when he died, I found out that everything was a lie, the business, the money, all of it. He was in debt up to his eyeballs. The IRS seized everything. So you're broke. Worse than broke. I owe money to people who don't accept payment plans, if you know what I mean. I stared at her. You got involved with loan sharks? Derek did, and when he died, his debts became my debts. They gave me 30 days to come up with $50,000, or... She trailed off, but I could fill in the blanks. And you thought you'd come crawling back to good old Gary, who'd bail you out like always. I thought maybe we could work something out. I know I hurt you, but we were married for 4 years. That has to count for something. I laughed, and this time there was humor in it. Dark, bitter humor. You know what counts, Lisa? The fact that I spent 2 years in therapy trying to put my life back together after you destroyed it. The fact that I had to declare bankruptcy because of the debt you left me with. The fact that I haven't been able to trust another woman since you walked out. Gary, I'm not finished. My voice was getting louder, and I didn't care who heard me. You want to know what really counts? The fact that you never once called to apologize. Not once in 7 years. No letter, no email, nothing. You just vanished like I never existed. Lisa was crying now, but I was past caring about her tears. I'd cried plenty of my own tears over the years. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. Sorry doesn't pay the bills, Lisa. Sorry doesn't give me back the 7 years I spent rebuilding my credit. Sorry doesn't... I stopped mid-sentence because I'd noticed something. A black SUV with tinted windows had pulled into the parking lot and was idling near the exit. The engine was running, but nobody got out. Lisa, I said quietly, are those your friends? She followed my gaze and went rigid. Oh God, they found me. How did they know you were here? I don't know. Maybe they've been watching you, waiting for me to make contact. The SUV's doors opened, and 2 men got out. They were wearing dark clothes and moved with the kind of casual confidence that comes from years of intimidating people for a living. One was tall and thin, the other short and stocky. Both looked like they could break me in half without working up a sweat. We need to get back inside, Lisa said, grabbing my arm again. But I didn't move. Something about this whole situation was bothering me, and it wasn't just the loan sharks. It was Lisa herself. The way she kept looking around nervously like she was expecting something to happen. The way her story had too many convenient details and not enough specifics. Gary, come on! She was pulling at my arm now, but I planted my feet and studied her face. What aren't you telling me, Lisa? What do you mean? I mean, this whole thing feels like a setup. You show up out of nowhere, after 7 years, conveniently get in an accident right here in town, and now suddenly there are loan sharks in the parking lot? It's a little too coincidental for my taste. The 2 men were walking toward us now, their hands in their pockets. But they weren't hurrying, and they weren't trying to surround us. If they were really dangerous, wouldn't they be more aggressive? Gary, please, we can discuss this later. Right now, we need to... No! I pulled my arm free from her grip. Right now, I need some answers, starting with why you really came back to town. Lisa's face changed. The fear was still there, but underneath it, I caught a glimpse of something else, something calculating and cold. It was an expression I remembered from our marriage, usually right before she asked me to do something I didn't want to do. Fine, she said. You want the truth? Derek didn't die of a heart attack. He was taken out. And the people who ended him think I know where he hid their money. Do you? She hesitated just a fraction too long. No. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Lisa was lying just like she'd lied about everything else. The question was, what was she really after? The 2 men had stopped about 20 feet away and were just standing there watching us. Now that they were closer, I could see that they looked more like off-duty security guards than hardened criminals. One of them was even wearing a wedding ring. Lisa, I said slowly, I think you need to find yourself a new emergency contact. I turned and walked back toward the hospital entrance, leaving her standing alone in the parking lot. Behind me, I heard her call my name, but I didn't look back. Whatever game she was playing, I wasn't interested in being a participant. But as I reached the hospital doors, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Lisa had always been persistent when she wanted something, and Something told me she hadn't given up yet. I was right. The next morning brought a hangover I hadn't earned and a phone call I didn't want. I'd spent the night at Benny's Tavern, nursing whiskey and trying to forget about Lisa, but apparently the universe had other plans. Gary, it's Detective Mills. I knew Mills from the old neighborhood. We'd grown up 3 blocks apart, played baseball together in high school. Now he was a cop and I was a construction worker who occasionally helped him fix his deck in exchange for free beer and war stories. What's up, Mills? I hear you had an interesting night at the hospital. I sat up in bed, instantly awake. How did you hear about that? Hospital security called it in. Said there was a domestic disturbance in the parking lot, and when they went to check it out, they found a woman claiming her ex-husband had abandoned her. She's not my wife anymore. Hasn't been for 7 years. Yeah, that's what I figured. But, Gary, there's something you should know. We ran her ID, and Lisa Weller has been living in town for the past 6 months. She's got an apartment over on Maple Street, and she's been working at Henderson Marketing under the name Lisa Collins. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. 6 months? Maybe longer. The landlord says she paid a year's rent up front, in cash. So she'd been back in town for months, maybe longer, and hadn't bothered to contact me until last night. Which meant the hospital story was probably BS too. Mills, I need a favor. I figured you might. What do you need? Can you find out if there really was a car accident on Route 9 last night? There was a pause. Gary, what are you getting yourself into? I don't know yet, but Lisa showed up out of nowhere with some story about loan sharks and dead boyfriends, and now you're telling me she's been in town for months. Something doesn't add up. All right, I'll make some calls. But Gary, be careful. People who disappear for 7 years and then show up with stories about loan sharks usually aren't looking for a reunion. After Mills hung up, I sat on the edge of my bed and tried to piece together what I knew. Lisa was back in town, living under a fake name, working at a marketing firm. She'd been here for months, but only contacted me when she needed something. And whatever that something was, it was important enough for her to lie about car accidents and loan sharks. I decided to do a little investigating of my own. My first stop was Mrs. Havers, my 70-year-old neighbor who spent most of her day watching the street from her front window. If a sparrow landed on someone's mailbox 3 blocks away, Mrs. Havers knew about it within the hour. "Gary, dear," she called out as I walked across my front yard. "How are you feeling this morning? You looked a little worse for wear when you came home last night." "I'm fine, Mrs. Havers. Listen, I was wondering if you'd noticed anyone unusual around the neighborhood lately. Maybe someone watching my house?" Her eyes lit up with the thrill of sharing gossip. "Oh my, yes. There was a woman, maybe 2 weeks ago. Blonde hair, very pretty, but she had this way of walking. Reminded me of someone, but I couldn't place it. She sat in a blue Honda across the street for almost an hour, just watching your house. Did you get a good look at her?" "Well, I didn't want to be nosy." Mrs. Havers saying she didn't want to be nosy was like saying the ocean didn't want to be wet, but I played along. "Of course not, but if you happen to notice anything," she looked familiar, dear, very familiar. And when she finally left, she drove past your driveway real slow, like she was memorizing it. Lisa, it had to be. She'd been casing my house, probably trying to figure out the best way to approach me. The hospital story was just her opening move. My second stop was Henderson Marketing, Lisa's alleged workplace. It was a mid-sized firm in a glass office building downtown, the kind of place that handled advertising for car dealerships and furniture stores. I didn't go inside, just sat in my truck across the street and watched. At 11:30, I saw her. She came out the front entrance wearing a navy blue business suit and carrying a leather briefcase. Her hair was pulled back in a professional-looking bun, and she walked with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. This wasn't the desperate, frightened woman from the hospital. This was the Lisa I remembered from our marriage. Ambitious, calculating, always working an angle. She got into a silver BMW. That was definitely not the kind of car someone drives when they're broke and running from loan sharks. I waited until she pulled out of the parking lot, then followed her at a distance. She drove to an upscale restaurant called Marcello's, the kind of place where they put cloth napkins on your lap and the cheapest entree costs $30. Through the window, I watched her meet with a man I didn't recognize. He was well-dressed, probably in his 40s, with the soft look of someone who spent more time behind a desk than in a gym. They talked for almost an hour, and their conversation looked intense. The man kept gesturing with his hands, and Lisa kept shaking her head. At one point, he reached across the table and grabbed her wrist. but she pulled away. When they finally stood up to leave, the man handed her a manila envelope. I followed Lisa back to her office, then drove home to think about what I'd seen. Whatever was going on, it was more complicated than Lisa's sob story about loan sharks and dead boyfriends. She was working, she was driving a nice car, and she was having secret meetings with mysterious men who gave her envelopes. My phone rang just as I pulled into my driveway. "Gary, it's Mills. I checked on that accident." And there was no accident on Route 9 last night. In fact, there haven't been any accidents on Route 9 all week. So Lisa had lied about the accident, just like I'd suspected. But why? What was she really doing at the hospital? "Mills, I need another favor." "Jesus, Gary, what now?" "Can you run a background check on Lisa? I want to know what she's been doing for the past 7 years." "That's not exactly legal." "Come on, Mills, you owe me for that deck." There was a long pause. "All right, but this is the last favor, and if anyone asks, we never had this conversation." "Deal." That evening, I drove to Benny's Tavern to wait for Mills's call and try to make sense of everything I'd learned. Benny's was the kind of place where the beer was cheap, the lighting was dim, and nobody asked questions they didn't want answered. It had been my refuge during the worst days after Lisa left, and Benny himself had listened to more of my problems than any bartender should have to. "You look like heck," Benny said as I slid onto my usual bar stool. "Feel worse than I look." "This about that ex-wife of yours?" "Word is she's back in town." I shouldn't have been surprised that Benny knew. In a city this size, news traveled fast, especially bad news. "Yeah, she's back, and she's up to something." Benny poured me a whiskey without being asked. "What kind of something?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." My phone buzzed with a text from Mills. "Meet me in the parking lot, 5 minutes." I found Mills sitting in his unmarked police car, smoking a cigarette and looking troubled. "Get in," he said. I slid into the passenger seat. "What did you find?" "Your ex-wife has been busy. After she left you, she moved to Chicago with Derek Hunt. He was running some kind of investment scam targeting wealthy retirees. They lived high for about 3 years, then the feds started closing in." "What happened?" "Derek died in a car accident while fleeing a federal warrant. Lisa disappeared. The feds assumed she was dead too, but apparently she was just good at staying hidden. Until now." "Until now?" "Gary, there's something else. The FBI is still looking for her. There's a warrant out for her arrest on federal fraud charges." I felt the pieces clicking into place. She's not running from loan sharks. She's running from the FBI. That's what it looks like. And if she's contacting you, it's because she needs something. Money, probably. Or maybe just a place to hide. So what do I do? Mills dropped his cigarette and crushed it under his heel. "You call the FBI and turn her in. That's what any sane person would do." But even as he said it, I knew I wasn't going to do that. Not yet. Lisa had destroyed my life once, and I'd spent 7 years putting the pieces back together. If she thought she could waltz back into town and use me again, she was wrong. But I wasn't going to just hand her over to the feds either. I was going to make her pay for what she'd done to me, and I was going to enjoy every minute of it. "Gary," Mills said, reading my expression, "don't do anything stupid." "Don't worry," I said, getting out of the car. "I'm not going to do anything stupid. I was going to do something smart, something that would give Lisa exactly what she deserved." The game was just beginning. The next morning, I called in sick to work and spent the day planning my revenge. It felt good to have a project again, something to focus on besides the daily grind of construction work and lonely evenings at Benny's Tavern. First, I needed to know more about Lisa's current situation. I drove to her apartment building on Maple Street, a converted Victorian house that had been divided into 4 units. Lisa's apartment was on the 2nd floor, overlooking a small garden that had gone to weeds. I parked across the street and waited. At 9:15, Lisa emerged wearing jeans and a sweater, carrying a gym bag. She looked casual, relaxed, nothing like the frightened woman from the hospital. She got into her BMW and drove toward downtown. I followed her to a fitness center called Elite Gym, one of those upscale places with personal trainers and smoothie bars. Through the windows, I watched her work out on the elliptical machine, chatting with other members like she'd been going there for years. This wasn't the behavior of someone running from the FBI. This was someone who'd settled into a comfortable routine, someone who felt safe and secure, which meant she probably had a plan, and that plan probably involved me. After Lisa finished her workout, I followed her to a coffee shop called The Daily Grind. She ordered a complicated drink with multiple modifiers and sat at a corner table with her laptop. For the next 2 hours, she typed furiously. occasionally making phone calls that looked heated. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but her body language told me everything I needed to know. She was stressed, frustrated, maybe even desperate. Whatever she was working on wasn't going well. At noon, she packed up her laptop and drove to Henderson Marketing. I waited until she was inside, then called the company's main number. Henderson Marketing, how may I help you? Hi, I'm trying to reach Lisa Collins. I believe she works in your accounts department. I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name. Interesting. So Lisa wasn't actually working at Henderson Marketing, despite what Detective Mills had told me. She was just using their building as cover, probably meeting clients or contacts there. That afternoon, I decided to pay a visit to Lisa's old friend Adriana. She still worked at the same marketing firm, where Lisa had met Derek 7 years ago. And if anyone knew what Lisa was really up to, it would be her. Adriana looked surprised to see me standing in the lobby of her office building. Gary? Oh my God, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you about Lisa. Her face went pale. Lisa? I haven't heard from Lisa in years, not since she left with Derek. That's funny, because she's been back in town for 6 months. Adriana glanced around nervously, then led me to a quiet corner of the lobby. Gary, I don't know what you think I know, but I think you know exactly what Lisa's been doing since she came back. I think you've been helping her, just like you helped her 7 years ago. I never helped her hurt you, Gary. You have to believe that. Really? Because I remember you showing me those Instagram photos of Lisa and Derek together. You said you felt sorry for me. But looking back, I think you were just trying to speed up the process. Get me out of the way so Lisa could clean out our accounts without interference. Adriana's face crumpled. It wasn't like that. Then tell me what it was like. She looked around again, making sure no one could overhear us. Lisa called me 3 weeks ago. She said she was in trouble and needed help. She wanted me to set up a meeting with some of our old clients, people who might be interested in investing in a new venture. What kind of venture? I don't know. She was vague about the details, but Gary, I swear I didn't know she was wanted by the FBI. She said she'd been living in California working for a tech company. And you believed her? I wanted to believe her. Lisa and I were best friends once, before everything went wrong. I thought maybe she'd changed. Maybe she was trying to make things right. Did you set up the meetings? Adriana nodded miserably. A few, but the clients weren't interested. They said her business plan didn't make sense, that it sounded too good to be true. Because it was too good to be true. Lisa's running the same scam she ran with Derek, just with different targets. Gary, what are you going to do? I looked at Adriana's frightened face and felt a moment of sympathy for her. She'd been Lisa's friend long before she'd been mine, and loyalty was hard to shake even when you knew better. I'm going to stop her, I said, before she hurts anyone else. That evening, I put the first part of my plan into action. I called the main number for Henderson Marketing and asked to speak to the building manager. This is Gary Weller. I'm a private investigator working on a fraud case. I have reason to believe that someone has been using your building to conduct illegal business meetings. What kind of illegal business? Investment fraud. The suspect has been meeting with potential victims in your lobby and conference rooms, using your company's reputation to legitimize her scam. The building manager was appropriately horrified. Within an hour, Lisa's access to the building had been revoked, and security had been instructed to escort her off the property if she tried to enter. It was a small victory, but it felt good. For the first time in 7 years, I was the one making the moves instead of reacting to Lisa's schemes. The next morning, I got a phone call that confirmed my strategy was working. Gary, it's Lisa. We need to talk. Do we? Someone's been interfering with my business. I think it might be you. I have no idea what you're talking about. Don't play games with me, Gary. I know you're angry about what happened between us, but this is bigger than our personal problems. Is it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the same old Lisa, running the same old scams. There was a long pause. Meet me tonight. Benny's Tavern, 9 o'clock. If you don't show up, I'll assume you want to do this the hard way. Is that a threat? It's a reality check. You have no idea what you're getting involved in. She hung up before I could respond, but I was smiling. Lisa was rattled and maybe even scared. My plan was working better than I'd hoped. That night, I arrived at Benny's Tavern 15 minutes early and positioned myself at a table where I could see the entire room. Benny himself was working the bar, and I'd filled him in on the situation earlier. If things went bad, I'd have backup. Lisa arrived exactly at 9, wearing a black dress that probably cost more than I made in a week. She looked around the room with obvious distaste. Her nose is wrinkling at the smell of stale beer and cigarette smoke. "Classy place," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "It suits me. Unlike some people, I don't pretend to be something I'm not." "Gary, we need to call a truce. What happened between us was a long time ago, and I know I hurt you. But right now, I need your help." "Help with what? Your investment scam? Your fake identity? Or maybe you need help staying one step ahead of the FBI?" Her composure cracked for just a moment, and I saw genuine fear flash across her face. "How do you know about that?" "I know about all of it, Lisa. Derek's death, the federal warrants, your new life as Lisa Collins. I even know about your meetings at Henderson Marketing and your attempts to recruit new victims through Adriana. If you know all that, then you know how dangerous this situation is. The people looking for me aren't just federal agents. Derek owed money to some very bad people, and they think I know where he hid their cash." "Do you?" She hesitated, just like she had in the hospital parking lot. "That's not the point. Actually, that's exactly the point. You do know where the money is, don't you? That's why you're running a new scam instead of just disappearing. You're trying to raise enough cash to pay off Derek's debts and buy your way out of trouble." Lisa's mask finally slipped completely. The frightened victim act disappeared, replaced by the cold calculation I remembered from our marriage. "Fine, yes, I know where Derek hid some of the money, but it's not enough to cover what he owed, and the people he borrowed from aren't patient. I need to raise another $100,000 in the next 2 weeks, or I'm dead." "And you thought I'd help you steal it from innocent people?" "I thought you might care enough about our history to help me stay alive." I leaned back in my chair and studied her face. Even now, even after everything she'd done, part of me wanted to help her. But I'd learned the hard way that Lisa's problems always became other people's problems, and I wasn't going to make that mistake again. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "You're going to pack up your things and leave town tonight. You're going to stop running scams and find some other way to solve your problems, and you're never going to contact me again. And if I don't, then I call Detective Mills and tell him exactly where the FBI can find you." Lisa stared at me for a long moment, and I could see her calculating the odds, trying to figure out if I was bluffing. "You wouldn't do that," she said finally. "You're not that cruel. Try me." She stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "This isn't over, Gary. You think you're so smart, but you have no idea what you're dealing with?" "Maybe not, but I know exactly what I'm dealing with when it comes to you." Lisa walked toward the door, then turned back. "You'll regret this. When those people come looking for me and find you instead, you'll wish you'd helped me." "Is that another threat?" "It's a promise." She left without another word, and I sat alone at the table, nursing my beer and wondering if I'd just made a terrible mistake. But as I thought about the past 7 years, about the therapy sessions and the bankruptcy and the sleepless nights, I realized I didn't care. For the first time since Lisa had walked out of my life, I was the one in control, and it felt good. Lisa didn't leave town. I knew she wouldn't, because running away wasn't her style. Lisa was a fighter, and when cornered, she always came out swinging. The first sign of retaliation came 2 days later when I arrived home from work to find my mailbox smashed and the word "loser" spray painted across my garage door in bright red letters. It was juvenile, petty, and exactly the kind of thing Lisa would do when she was angry. The second sign came that evening when Detective Mills called me. "Gary, I just got off the phone with your supervisor at Brennan Construction. Someone called in an anonymous tip claiming you've been stealing tools from job sites." "That's BS, and you know it. Of course it's BS. But your boss has to investigate, which means you're suspended pending an internal review." I felt the familiar rage building in my chest. The same helpless anger I'd felt 7 years ago when Lisa had systematically destroyed my life. But this time was different. This time I was ready for her. "Mills, I need you to do something for me." "Gary, I've already done enough." "This is the last thing, I promise. I need you to put surveillance on Lisa's apartment. Not official surveillance and just drive by a few times a day and see what she's up to." "Why?" "Because she's planning something, and I want to know what it is before she does it." Mills sighed. "All right, but Gary, this has to end soon. I can't keep covering for you indefinitely." That night, I decided to take the offensive. If Lisa wanted to play dirty, I could play dirty too. And I had 7 years of anger to fuel my creativity. My first target was her BMW. I waited until after midnight, then drove to her apartment building and parked down the street. Her car was sitting in the small parking lot behind the building, gleaming under the streetlights like a silver trophy. I didn't key the paint or slash the tires. That would have been too obvious, too easy to trace back to me. Instead, I did something much more subtle and infinitely more frustrating. I loosened the valve stems on all 4 tires, just enough to cause a slow leak. By morning, her car would be sitting on 4 flat tires, but there would be no obvious vandalism. She'd have to call a tow truck, pay for new tires, and spend half her day dealing with the inconvenience. Then I unscrewed her license plate and hid it under a nearby dumpster. Driving without a license plate would get her pulled over, and a routine traffic stop might reveal her outstanding warrants. Finally, I placed a small magnetic GPS tracker under her rear bumper. It was the kind of device private investigators use to follow cheating spouses, completely legal and nearly impossible to detect. If Lisa was planning something, I wanted to know where she went and who she met with. The next morning, I sat in my truck across the street from her apartment building and watched through binoculars as Lisa discovered my handiwork. Even from a distance, I could see her frustration as she walked around the car, kicking the flat tires and shouting at no one in particular. She called a tow truck, then stood in the parking lot for 20 minutes arguing with someone on her phone. When the tow truck finally arrived, she climbed into the passenger seat and rode with the driver to a nearby tire shop. I followed at a distance, using the GPS tracker to monitor her location. While she waited for her car to be repaired, she made more phone calls, her gestures becoming increasingly agitated. Whatever she was planning, my little prank had thrown a wrench into her schedule. That afternoon, Mills called with an update. Your ex-wife had an interesting day. First the tire problem, then she got pulled over for driving without a license plate. The officer ran her fake ID and didn't find anything, but he gave her a ticket and a warning. Good. Maybe she'll get the message. Gary, there's something else. I drove by her apartment building, like you asked, and I saw her meeting with 2 men in the parking lot. They didn't look like federal agents. What did they look like? Like the kind of guys you don't want to meet in a dark alley. Big, well-dressed, expensive cars. One of them grabbed her arm during their conversation, and she looked scared. So Lisa hadn't been lying about owing money to dangerous people, but that didn't change anything. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. Mills, I want you to stay away from this. If those guys are as dangerous as they look, I don't want you getting caught in the crossfire. What about you? I can take care of myself. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure it was true. Lisa's problems were bigger than I'd realized, and I was starting to wonder if I was in over my head. That evening, I was sitting at home planning my next move when someone knocked on my front door. I looked through the peephole and saw a man I didn't recognize, well-dressed and professional-looking, holding a manila envelope. Mr. Weller, I have a delivery for you. I opened the door, but kept the chain lock engaged. What kind of delivery? Legal documents. You need to sign for them. I knew what they were before I opened the envelope. A restraining order filed by Lisa Collins, claiming that I'd been stalking and harassing her. According to the documents, I was prohibited from coming within 500 feet of her apartment, her workplace, or any location where she might reasonably be expected to be found. It was a smart move on Lisa's part. The restraining order would make it difficult for me to continue my surveillance, and if I violated it, I could be arrested. She was using the legal system against me, just like she'd used it 7 years ago when she'd cleaned out our joint accounts. But Lisa had made one mistake. She'd filed the restraining order under her fake name, Lisa Collins, which meant it was based on fraudulent information and probably wouldn't hold up in court if I decided to challenge it. More importantly, it told me that my tactics were working. Lisa was scared enough to involve the courts, which meant she was running out of options. The next morning, I called in another favor from an old friend. Tommy Breslin had been my partner at the auto shop before I'd moved into construction, and now he ran his own garage on the south side of town. Tommy owed me money from a poker game 3 years ago, and it was time to collect. Gary, what can I do for you? I need to borrow your tow truck for a few hours. What for? Let's just say I'm helping someone with their transportation problems. Tommy grinned. Does this have anything to do with that ex-wife of yours? Because Benny told me she was back in town and you looked ready to end someone the other night at the tavern. Just loan me the truck, Tommy, and make sure you have an alibi for this afternoon. At 2 o'clock, I drove Tommy's tow truck to the parking lot behind Lisa's apartment building. Her BMW was back from the tire shop, parked in its usual spot. I hooked it up to the tow truck and drove it to an impound lot on the other side of town, where another friend of mine worked the afternoon shift. "How long do you want me to keep it?" he asked. "A week should do it, and make sure the paperwork gets lost for a few days." Without her car, Lisa would be stuck relying on public transportation or expensive taxi rides. It would limit her mobility and make it harder for her to conduct whatever business she was planning. But more than that, it would send a message. I wasn't the same naive husband she'd manipulated 7 years ago. I'd learned from my mistakes, and I was ready to fight back. That evening, I sat at Benny's Tavern and waited for Lisa to make her next move. I didn't have to wait long. She walked into the tavern at 8:30 wearing jeans and a sweater, looking tired and frustrated. Several of the regular customers turned to stare at her, but she ignored them and walked straight to my table. "You son of a witch," she said, sliding into the chair across from me. "Where's my car? I have no idea what you're talking about." "Don't play games with me, Gary. I know it was you. Prove it." Lisa leaned across the table and her voice dropping to a whisper. "You think this is funny? You think you're getting revenge for what happened 7 years ago? I think you're paranoid. Maybe you should see a therapist. Those men I owe money to, they're not patient and they're not reasonable. When they can't find me, they're going to start looking for people I've been in contact with, people like you. Then maybe you should have thought of that before you decided to involve me in your problems." Lisa sat back in her chair, studying my face. "You've changed, Gary. You used to be kind, compassionate. What happened to you? You happened to me 7 years ago when you destroyed my life and walked away without looking back. I was young and stupid and scared. I made mistakes. You made choices, and now you get to live with the consequences." Lisa stood up, her hands shaking with anger. "Fine, you want to do this the hard way? We'll do it the hard way, but don't say I didn't warn you." She walked toward the door, then turned back one last time. "You have no idea what you've gotten yourself into, Gary, but you're about to find out." After she left, Benny came over to my table with a fresh beer. "You sure you know what you're doing, Gary?" "No," I said, "but I'm sure I'm not going to let her destroy my life again. What if those guys she owes money to really do come looking for you?" I thought about that for a moment, then shrugged. "Then I guess we'll see how tough they really are." But even as I said it, I could feel a cold knot of fear forming in my stomach. Lisa's problems were escalating, and I was right in the middle of them, whether I wanted to be or not. The game was getting dangerous, but it was too late to quit now. The escalation came faster than I'd expected. 2 days after Lisa's visit to Benny's Tavern, I came home from work to find my front door standing open and my living room trashed. Furniture was overturned, drawers were pulled out and dumped on the floor, and someone had gone through my personal belongings with methodical thoroughness. But nothing was missing. This wasn't a burglary. It was a message. I called Detective Mills, and he arrived within 20 minutes, bringing a crime scene photographer and a fingerprint kit. "Any idea who might have done this?" Mills asked, though we both knew the answer. "Lisa's friends, probably, the ones you saw her meeting with." Mills nodded grimly. "So, Gary, this is getting out of hand. Maybe it's time to call the FBI and let them handle Lisa." "Not yet." "Why not?" "Because I wasn't finished with her yet. Because 7 years of anger and humiliation couldn't be satisfied by simply turning her over to the authorities. Because I wanted Lisa to know exactly how it felt to have your life systematically destroyed by someone you'd trusted." But I didn't say any of that to Mills. Instead, I said, "Because the FBI will just arrest her and put her in prison. That's too easy. Gary, give me 1 more week. If I can't resolve this by then, I'll call the FBI myself." Mills looked around at the destruction in my living room, then back at my face. "All right, 1 week, but if anyone gets hurt, this stops immediately." After Mills left, I spent the evening cleaning up the mess and planning my next move. Lisa was getting desperate, which meant she was also getting careless. And desperate, careless people made mistakes. The GPS tracker I'd placed on her car was still active, even though the car was sitting in an impound lot. But I'd also planted a second tracker, a smaller one, hidden inside her gym bag when she'd left it unattended at Elite Gym. That tracker was still moving, which meant Lisa was still going about her daily routine despite losing her car. According to the GPS data, Lisa had spent most of the previous day at a location I didn't recognize. An office building in the financial district. She'd been there for almost 6 hours, which suggested a meeting or series of meetings rather than a casual visit. I decided to pay the building a visit myself. The address turned out to be a 20-story office tower filled with accounting firms, investment advisors, and financial consultants. The kind of place where Lisa would feel comfortable hunting for new victims for her scam. I spent the morning in the lobby pretending to read a newspaper while watching the elevator bank. At 11:30, I saw Lisa emerge from an elevator, followed by an elderly man in an expensive suit. They were deep in conversation, and the man was nodding enthusiastically at whatever Lisa was telling him. I followed them to the building's coffee shop, where they continued their discussion over lattes and pastries. From my position at a nearby table, I could hear fragments of their conversation. Guaranteed return of 20% annually, exclusive investment opportunity, limited time offer for qualified investors. It was the same pitch Lisa had probably used with Derek's victims 7 years ago. The elderly man was clearly interested, asking detailed questions about minimum investments and withdrawal policies. Lisa answered smoothly, professionally, with the confidence of someone who'd given this presentation dozens of times. When their meeting ended, the man shook Lisa's hand and promised to discuss it with his financial advisor. Lisa gave him a business card and her most charming smile. After the man left, Lisa remained in the coffee shop, typing on her laptop and making phone calls. I moved to a table where I could see her screen, and what I saw made my blood run cold. She had a spreadsheet open, listing names, phone numbers, and investment amounts. There were at least 30 names on the list, with amounts ranging from $50,000 to $500,000. At the bottom of the spreadsheet was a running total, $3.2 million. Lisa wasn't just running a small-time scam to pay off Derek's debts. She was planning a massive fraud that would destroy dozens of lives, just like she'd destroyed mine. I couldn't let that happen. That afternoon, I drove to the office building and asked to speak with the building manager. I identified myself as a private investigator and explained that I was working on a fraud case involving one of his tenants. "Which tenant?" the manager asked. "I'm not sure of the exact office number, but she's a blonde woman, early 30s, goes by the name Lisa Collins. She's been using your building to meet with potential victims of an investment scam." The manager frowned. "We don't have any tenant by that name. She might be using someone else's office or meeting clients in common areas. That's not allowed. All business meetings have to be conducted in leased office space, and all visitors have to be signed in by their hosts. Would you be willing to help me identify her?" An hour later, the building manager and I were reviewing security footage from the lobby cameras. It didn't take long to spot Lisa entering the building that morning, but what surprised me was who she was with. "That's Marcus Webb," the manager said, pointing to the well-dressed man walking beside Lisa. "He's a tenant here, runs a financial consulting firm on the 15th floor. Is he legitimate? As far as I know, he's been here for 3 years, pays his rent on time, no complaints." So Lisa had found herself a partner, someone with an established business and a good reputation to lend credibility to her scam. It was a smart move, and it explained how she'd been able to attract so many potential investors. But it also gave me the leverage I needed to stop her. I spent the next 2 days researching Marcus Webb and his business. What I found was interesting. Webb had been investigated by the State Securities Commission 2 years earlier for questionable sales practices, but no charges had been filed. He was walking a fine line between legitimate business and outright fraud, which made him the perfect partner for someone like Lisa. On Friday afternoon, I made an appointment to see Webb under the pretense of being a potential investor. His office was impressive. Mahogany furniture, expensive artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows with a view of the city. Webb himself was smooth, professional, and completely convincing. "Mr. Weller, I understand you're interested in our exclusive investment program." "That's right. Lisa Collins referred me. She said you were offering guaranteed returns of 20% annually." Webb's smile flickered for just a moment. "Ms. Collins is one of our most enthusiastic clients, but I should clarify that while our historical returns have averaged 20%, we can't guarantee future performance." "But that's what Lisa told me. She said it was guaranteed." "I'm afraid there may have been a miscommunication. No investment can be guaranteed, as I'm sure you understand." I leaned forward in my chair. "Mr. Webb, I think we need to have an honest conversation. I know who Lisa Collins really is, and I know what kind of scam you're running together." Webb's face went pale. "I'm sorry, but I think there's been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. Lisa Collins is actually Lisa Weller, and she's wanted by the FBI for investment fraud. She's been using your office and your reputation to legitimize a Ponzi scheme that's going to collapse and destroy both of your lives. Webb stared at me for a long moment, then slowly sank back in his chair. Oh God, I knew something was wrong. The returns she was promising, the way she kept pushing for larger investments. But she had references, documentation, all fake, just like her name and her background. What do you want from me? I want you to call every investor on that list and tell them the deal is off. I want you to return any money that's already been invested. And I want you to cut all ties with Lisa immediately. And if I don't, then I call the State Securities Commission and the FBI, and you go down with her. Webb was quiet for a long time, staring out the window at the city below. Finally, he nodded. All right, I'll make the calls today. Good. And Mr. Webb, if you ever see Lisa Collins again, you should run in the opposite direction. That evening, I drove to Lisa's apartment building and waited in the parking lot. According to the Jeep's tracker, she was inside, probably making phone calls and trying to salvage her collapsing scam. At 8 o'clock, she emerged from the building, walking quickly toward the street. Without her car, she was dependent on public transportation, which made her predictable and vulnerable. I followed her to a bus stop, then got on the same bus and sat 3 rows behind her. She was talking on her phone, her voice tense and angry. What do you mean you're canceling? We had a deal. No, I don't care what your attorney says. Marcus, don't you dare hang up on me. The call ended and Lisa stared at her phone in disbelief. Then she immediately dialed another number. It's me. We have a problem. Webb is backing out and he's returning the money to the investors. I don't know how he found out, but someone got to him. She listened for a moment, then her face went white. What do you mean Gary Weller was asking questions? How do you know that name? I couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but Lisa's reaction told me everything I needed to know. Someone had connected me to the collapse of her scam, and that someone was probably not happy about it. Lisa ended the call and immediately dialed a third number. Gary, it's Lisa. We need to talk. Tonight, it's important. I could hear my own voicemail greeting through her phone. She left a message, her voice shaking with barely controlled panic. Gary, I know you're the one who ruined my deal with Marcus. I don't know how you found out about it, but you've made a terrible mistake. The people I owe money to aren't going to accept excuses, and when they can't collect from me, they're going to come after you. Meet me at the warehouse district, Pier 17 at midnight. Come alone. Maybe we can figure out a way to fix this. The bus reached Lisa's stop and she got off, still clutching her phone. I watched through the window as she walked away, her shoulders slumped in defeat. But I wasn't going to meet her at Pier 17. I had a better idea. At 11:30 that night, I called Detective Mills. Mills, I need you to meet me at Pier 17 in the warehouse district and bring backup. Gary, what's going on? Lisa's planning something, and I think it's going to get ugly. I'll explain everything when you get there. Gary, just trust me, Mills, and hurry. I arrived at Pier 17 at 11:45 and parked where I could see the entire area. The warehouse district was deserted at night, nothing but empty buildings and rusted shipping containers. It was the perfect place for a confrontation, which was probably why Lisa had chosen it. At exactly midnight, a black SUV pulled up to the pier. 3 men got out, and even in the dim light, I could see they were the same men Mills had seen meeting with Lisa at her apartment building. Lisa arrived 5 minutes later in a taxi. She paid the driver and walked toward the men, her movements stiff with fear. I couldn't hear their conversation from my position, but their body language told the story. The men were angry, Lisa was desperate, and the situation was escalating quickly. Then I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. One of the men grabbed Lisa's arm and started dragging her toward the SUV. She struggled, shouting something I couldn't make out. The other 2 men looked around nervously, clearly spooked by the approaching sirens. Detective Mills arrived with 2 patrol cars, just as the men were trying to force Lisa into the SUV. The warehouse district was suddenly flooded with flashing lights and shouting voices. Police! Everyone on the ground! The 3 men released Lisa and raised their hands. Lisa collapsed to her knees on the concrete pier, sobbing with relief or terror, or both. Within minutes, all 4 of them were in handcuffs. I drove home that night feeling a mixture of satisfaction and emptiness. Lisa's scam was finished, her dangerous associates were in custody, and my 7-year quest for revenge was finally complete. But somehow it didn't feel like victory, it just felt like the end of a very long, very ugly chapter in my life. The next morning, Detective Mills called to fill me in on the details. The three men are connected to a loan sharking operation out of Cleveland. They were here to collect the money Derek Hunt owed them, plus interest. They're looking at charges for attempted kidnapping and extortion. What about Lisa? She's cooperating with the FBI. In exchange for her testimony against the loan sharks and information about Derek's other victims, she'll probably get a reduced sentence. Maybe 5 years instead of 20. And that's it? That's it. She's out of your life for good, Gary. You can move on now. But as I hung up the phone, I realized I wasn't sure how to move on. For 7 years, my anger at Lisa had been the driving force in my life. It had gotten me through the bankruptcy, the therapy, the lonely nights and empty weekends. Now that it was gone, I felt lost. I spent the day at Benny's Tavern, nursing beer and trying to figure out what came next. Benny himself was working the afternoon shift, and he could tell something was bothering me. "You should be celebrating," he said, refilling my glass. "You won." Did I? Lisa's in jail, her scam is finished, and you're still standing. Sounds like winning to me. Then why do I feel so empty? Benny leaned against the bar and studied my face. Because revenge is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. It might feel good while you're planning it, but in the end, it just makes you sick. So what do I do now? Now you figure out how to live without anger. It's harder than it sounds. That evening, I drove to the pier where Lisa had been arrested. The warehouse district was quiet again, just empty buildings and rusted containers under the pale moonlight. I stood at the edge of the pier and looked out at the dark water, thinking about the past 7 years and the choices I'd made. Lisa had destroyed my life once, and I'd spent 7 years destroying hers in return. We were even now, but neither of us had won. We just wasted 7 years that we could never get back. I pulled out my phone and deleted Lisa's contact information, erasing the last digital connection between us. Then I drove home to start figuring out how to build a life based on something other than revenge. It was going to be harder than destroying what had been, but for the first time in 7 years, I was looking forward instead of backward. And that felt like a kind of victory after all.